It's July 28th, 2023. This is Sergeant Sarah Ashton-Cirillo of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, coming to you live from the Territorial Defense Forces media studios in Kyiv. You're watching Ukraine in the Know. And before we get to today's news, I'd like to remind you that you can watch us on YouTube at TDF Media Studios, where we're streaming live right now, as well as on Twitter. We would also like to remind you that you can share and retweet this, like it and bookmark it, in order to make certain that any questions you may have about the official news coming out of Ukraine is here and available to you 24 hours a day. Today is a packed show. We're going to begin with messaging from the Land Force Commander, General Siersky, Commander of Ground Forces, General Siersky, who gave us an update just about 4 hours ago as to the entire frontline situation. General Siersky made it known that logistics and analysis have played an important role in making certain that we're able to deoccupy so much of the temporarily occupied areas and to lead us towards the complete liberation of Ukraine and a return to the 1991 borders. And along with that update about the logistics situation, General Siersky made certain to remind everyone that the battles in Bakhmut are successful and has increased our liberated territories in a gradual but continuous manner, despite the intense battles that are taking place along that area, and with the Russians pushing back in the areas of Kurmaivka, Andriivka, and Klishivka. Additionally, in the south, the Russians are pushing towards an attempt in the Zaporizhia region. However, we are moving ahead in Melitopol and Berdyansk, with the most aggressive Russian actions taking place in the north. In the Kharkiv region, where in Kupiansk, they are sending their most professional troops at us, but being repelled every time. Moving on to international news, the United States Senate yesterday approved by a vote of 86-11 their portion of the National Defense Authorization Act. And in it was an extension of aid to Ukraine at least through 2027, with a price tag put on it of $300 million. However, that's just a starting point. This does not include aid that would be coming from other bills and other portions of the federal government, with an invitation from the United States Senate to the White House that they can feel free to send supplemental spending bills to the Senate as necessary. This also does not include the current drawdown that has been approved and has been utilized by the Biden administration to continue to support Ukrainian offensive actions in the face of Russian aggression. Word also came from Germany today, where the Germans have now officially delivered the following items: 10 more tracked all-terrain Bandwagens, 6 Gepard anti-aircraft guns, more than 2,500 shells belonging to the 155mm artillery, smoke artillery shells. We have to ask the Germans what they mean by that. 20 reconnaissance UAVs, Hydrons, 13 reconnaissance drone vectors, and 8 ambulance response vehicles. Continuing forward, a topic of conversation that has been discussed in the Global South has been Putins Summit with African leaders. However, that has to be in quotes, as the African leaders in attendance total less than 20. In fact, only 17 of the more than 50 African nations are represented at Putins Summit. And Putin has been showing an absolute display of neo-colonialistic behavior and indicating once again that Russia is focused on imperialism. In doing so, he's attempted to give out trinkets, such as a helicopter to the president of Zimbabwe, while making certain that Africa is potentially starving due to his pulling out of the Ukrainian grain deal and, in fact, sabotaging and destruction of vast swaths of Ukraine's grain production. This includes grain being stolen from the Kherson region by some of the Kadyrov mafia from Chechnya. Furthermore, regarding Putin and the African summit, due to what we've seen on camera, it does appear Putin is still in the throes of whatever mystery illness that he may be facing, including some signs of dementia. If you look closely, you'll see him wandering around, staring off into space, and otherwise disengaged, while those African leaders around him simply make him wait. Why? Because ultimately, in the end, everyone knows that the Russians are simply placeholders in the international stage as they await their transformative defeat at the hands of the armed forces of Ukraine. Closer to home, we had an attempt of Russian sabotage in the Sumy district, where across the border, Russian recon and sabotage units attempted to infiltrate Ukraine and were immediately neutralized by border guards and special operations forces from the armed forces of Ukraine. The defense forces once again stopping an attempt by Russia to open up a potentially new front. Along the area of the north next to Sumy, in the Bryansk Oblast region of Russia, we're preparing for a potential false flag attack by the Russians on their own territory due to the fact that chatter has increased exponentially over the last few days in order to prepare their population for what they will claim to be an attack by Ukrainian forces. However, we can assure you here on Ukraine in the Know that there is no intent to attack the people of Bryansk at this time, and yet again, it's Russia preparing for a false flag. Domestically, we have a new interim Minister of Culture. The First Deputy has stepped up into the place of the interim position after the resignation of the former Minister of Culture and Information. And on the judicial stand, we are looking at an official prosecution that will be getting underway in the situation of the Antonov enterprises, where, if you recall, the Maria airplane, the largest cargo plane in the world, the largest airliner in the world, was destroyed in the early days of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and the former director of Antonov Enterprises has been indicted and will now stand trial for negligence and the loss of more than 8.5 billion hryvnia in property, in addition to the iconic Maria jet. In the Rada has just passed a VAT reduction act that all anti-drone guns and thermal imagers coming into the country will no longer be subject to VAT upon the signature of President Zelensky. And we will end with a celebration of Ukrainian statehood, where for over 1,000 years, the people of Ukraine, with the baptism of Rus, have stood strong against the tribes from the east, and in this case, they're still standing strong against the eastern tribes, represented by Vladimir Putin and his cabal of Kremlin criminals. We're proud to celebrate statehood today in Ukraine. This is Ukraine in the Know. I'm Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, Junior Sergeant in the Armed Forces, welcoming you to join us 6 days a week, Monday through Friday at 1700 Kyiv time and at 1600 on Saturdays. Slava Ukraini! May God bless our troops, our sailors, our pilots, and all those standing strong in resistance against the Russian imperialism. And remember, when you win a fencing match, you don't need to shake the hands